Hey everyone, and welcome to the ProfNoctis Weekly Show. I'm not ProfNoctis, but this is. Tell them what we got this week.
This week we are talking about video game vacations and can a game be too difficult?
Wade, I have a question as we get into our new segment, and especially since you had a really good time very late last night playing Lies of P, your Pinocchio action-adventure game, which you've been playing and reading the original story of Pinocchio on. I hear they're making an audiobook of your voice reading it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some people in the community that are stitching together all of the audio recordings.
Big
With increasing level of frustration in my voice as I get toward the end of the book.
Yeah, we're getting to the nature of my question then. So, based on what you experienced last night, can a game be too difficult?
All right, for those that were not watching the stream last night, I died 50 times.
5-0.
The same boss. Same boss. I did not beat a boss last night. I thought this was going to be the finale of Lies of P, but maybe it was the final lie. Who's to say? It is horrible. I reworked several times.
Read some
And I just
guides.
I died and died. Now here's the question. Can a game be too hard? And I just first of all want to say I'm a little offended that you asked me that, because the game is not too hard for me. I can do this. I can beat this game.
I believe in you.
I will beat this game.
I know.
And it'll probably be tonight. Who knows? Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. This episode will be airing long after you have.
It'll be airing after. Oh my gosh, it will be airing after, but you can go back and relive it on the VODs.
What are we gonna do if you haven't beaten Lies of P before this episode airs?
I don't know. You're gonna have to probably knock me out because I'll be drowning. And
Good callback. That's a great
callback to another segment.
So the question, can a game be too difficult? This was in part spawned by the new Elden Ring DLC, which dropped.
Everybody's losing their minds.
Much discussion about this game and if it's too difficult and what that looks like. So we wanted to do an episode on really just like difficulty and skill level in games and trying to understand a little bit more of the dynamics involved.
Yeah, I mean, a quick answer off the top of my head is that a game can be too difficult, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist, right? Some people love that challenge. Dark Souls games, Elden Ring is not for everyone. The developer said that.
Yeah.
Part of our identity, DNA, he said, is that we make these really difficult games, and there's a specific player that this caters to. And it's amazing to hear a dev say, our games aren't for everybody. I think that really goes into, I remember when I was doing my dissertation, they said if your research has no detractors, everybody agrees with it, it's not really groundbreaking. It's not really research.
Okay.
It's just a reiteration of what's already been done. So instead, niche down, understand that you are one brick in the building of research. And I think the same thing is true in games. Difficulty is important. Now, is a game beatable? That's a better question, I think. And maybe it's not beatable by every person, but it should be done by somebody. Like,
video games have a unique ability to elicit a visceral reaction from many of us.
Oh my gosh,
like,
yeah. What do you do when you get frustrated in a game?
I think at its most basic, when I'm moving my body with the motions because I'm like trying to physically dodge and I can't be aware of the fact that I'm like making noises and dodging around. For those of you who are listening, I made dramatic moving motions with controller, fake controller in my hand. That's at its core. But then I think eliciting audible responses from me, like when you die, like when I die and I was close to beating a boss. Let's talk about this moment in gaming. When the health bar gets to a certain amount on a boss that you have been fighting, I'm like, no, this happened to me last night when I was playing, and that health bar gets really low. My lizard brain goes nuts. I abandon all of the sound tactics that got me to this point in the boss, because I'm like, I just gotta finish it off. So I'm not dodging. I'm not blocking. I'm not rolling. I'm not paying attention to move sequences. I am spamming damage buttons desperately so that I can just get across the line. What about you?
It's the choke threshold, right? Like this happens in baseball. In soccer, it's like the game is on the line and it depends on you and your ability. And what do? You choke. You choke in the moment of decision. And that, like, oh, God, I hated it in sports and I hated it in video games. And it happened to me last night and I'm still dealing with it. Okay? Like, I got this stupid boss.
Yes.
Luxatia or whatever her name is. Oh, I hate her. So she's got 2 phases. I was pretty good on the first phase. Second phase, make it all the way to the, like, I have figured out the dodging mechanics. I'm deflecting Legend of Zelda style fireball, lightning bolt, whatever's back at her. She has a hair's breadth of health. You can't even see the health on there.
Imperceptible.
And I choke. Like, I just like, I choke. Okay. Like, I just straight up choke. And like, I had it in the freaking bag. One hit would have done it.
Oh,
and she's shooting these lightning bolts at me. And I'd like, deflect. And then I hesitated on the third one and she obliterated me. And I went to bed angry, which is like the number 1 rule in like psychology. Don't go to bed angry, right?
It's a great clip. We'll have to include the clip in the segment so people
I'm
can
still mad about it. I bit my controller, Evan. I bit it.
I bit it. Oh.
I bit my controller. I think there's a tooth mark in it. Like I bit it.
We're gonna need to verify that at some point. That's amazing. Well, I mean, I think that's true though. There's something that happens when we hit this. Like, I'm just about to get over the threshold, and our lizard brain fires off, and we lose our composure. This is often the moment where, for me and my brother in our lives, it would be the voice of our mother. And there's probably someone like this in your life, if you're watching or listening, who asks you one of 2 questions, sometimes both in sequence. First question, infuriating, because our lizard brain is activated. And the question is, do you need to take a break?
Somebody in the chat, when I was struggling one night, said, maybe we should sleep on it and try again tomorrow. And I was like, you better not. You better not.
That's just the advanced version of do you need to take a break?
Yeah.
Maybe like suggesting a concrete action. The other thing that we get asked a question, and this is usually after the do you need to take a break, is, are you even having fun anymore?
And yes, I am having fun, but I would have more fun if you would stop yapping at me and I could get back to my game, right?
Yeah, and that really ends well when you say that to a parent.
Oh, when you say that to a parent or as a kid. Oh man, it's not good, right? And so, but there is a component of this that's like, I love to hate this.
Yeah.
I love the challenge, and I hate the challenge all at once. Because, and this was true with Elden Ring, this was true with Bloodborne, all of these games, and like with Lies of P, even with the bosses that I've been able to beat by, skin of my teeth or whatever, which is a weird phrase, especially after you bite a controller. But when you're just barely able to win, there's like this endorphin rush and release that you're like, yes, I will do this again. And so that gameplay loop of emotion keeps you playing. I've never rage quit a game though, I'll say.
Never?
I don't think so. Because
it happens to me.
I mean, I've rage quit like baseball.
That's a game.
Like I played t-ball and then fast pitch baseball.
You were out of it.
And then I was like, I'm done. But I don't know if it was like a rage quit, but it was more of like, I'm done with this.
I am more prone to rage quit, not from strangers, but when I'm playing a game with somebody who's really close to me. There's multiple examples of my brother innocently, quote unquote, doing something in a multiplayer game that
Yeah.
had no benefit to him, but certainly messed me up.
Yeah.
That I've, it just unlocks something primal. But I think the intensity of emotions can provide a window into other aspects of our lives. And as we are apt to explore, we like to talk about ideas and the things going on behind the scenes in our brains and our lives, and what we can learn from the way that we play games. So, what is the best way to phrase this segment? I think our guiding phrase would be something like how to know when you aren't having fun anymore and understanding the ways you like to be challenged. How to know when you aren't having fun anymore and understanding the ways that you like to be challenged. What do you think
When
about
is
that?
it time to take a break? In one of our previous segments, we talked about the idea of games helping you recover yourself, right? And so something that I've got to be attuned with, and sometimes this happens with the things that come out of my mouth or the actions that I'm having, if I'm wanting to throw a controller through a screen or whatever.
Yeah.
We talked about this idea of gaming as recovering your lost self. When you are no longer recovering your lost self, but maybe you're living into that lost self, you're saying, you're interacting, you're doing things that are not who you are and who you aspire to be. That's one of those reactions that I'm like, oh, I maybe I should take a break and stuff.
Okay.
If I'm like being destructive to things, if I'm mad at the dog because she snored a little too loudly next to me, maybe it's like, okay, let me go get a Triscuit or something, and I'll come back. A Triscuit. I don't know why. I don't even own Triscuits.
I need a breaded wheat cracker. Stat.
Apples and peanut butter. Somebody.
How do they weave those little wheat tendrils together into a beautiful square? I need
someone give me a saltine.
I'm experiencing transference of my frustrations onto my dog. Quick, I need a Triscuit.
It's like that Snickers commercial.
Those are
not
great.
yourself.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great commercials. It's true. It's true. I mean, I'm
know Betty White.
I know friends who carry snacks around with them to make sure that in case their other friends get hungry, they can feed them. So that's how you are with your granola bars.
That's just how my friends are when we are traveling together. They bring emergency food for me, not for themselves, for me.
Because they know you're going to fall off the cliff.
Oh, you're snoring too loudly.
Okay, so let's talk about some ways that we can understand why we're feeling certain ways. So there's some research that was done that we wanted to talk about that will help us to understand what to do when the thing that you go to restore you and help you recover isn't really serving that function anymore. When the thing that you go to recover or restore yourself isn't really serving that function anymore because you're either too stressed out or you're bored or you just don't seem interested anymore, because that's a bit of a crisis. Have you ever had that moment where the thing that you would normally turn to help you kind of recenter yourself and relax, that like stress of life
becomes a moment of stress.
Seeps its way into that. I mean, what do you do? It's this moment where you really feel lost. You just kind of, for me, I just kind of sit there. What does that look like for you when you don't even want to do the things that you do for fun?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine recently about how he felt burnt out on games, and he was telling me, kind of that feeling. He was like, yeah, it usually gives me a sense of fulfillment and like just a escape and all that kind of stuff. But lately I just feel like I'm burned out. There's nothing I really want to play and stuff. And the way that he mitigated that was trying to rechannel into some other activities. So reading a book or, playing music. He's a musician and stuff like that. So it was just diverting those things. Sometimes we do need to take a break from the things that we use to take breaks, and I think that we all feel that. But then there are these catalytic moments when the thing that we typically enjoy is no longer enjoyable, and there's an actual reason why.
Okay, what is that?
Well, and I think that it has to do with the play style. It has to do with the frustration, maybe escalating beyond our enjoyment of the thing. Now, you have done research in this before, like when you were in college and studying on all of that kind of stuff. You've got a chart or something that helps us out with that. Tell us about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to mark that I am presenting some research today.
I know, right? This is a big moment.
Role reversal. Do you
I didn't know about this. You told it to me off stream, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's something we need to talk about."
Should I do it in your style? Should I try and imitate your cadence?
Tediously labored and boring.
No, because you always
my
go,
students would love that. So
you say da 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 da. Now this is the thing. Da 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 da. That's everybody, ladies and gentlemen. That's my ProfNoctis impression. There we go. There we go. I'm taking a bow if you can't see. So there's a guy named Mahaye Csikszentmihalyi. I'm going to spell each letter of his name so that you can just really appreciate that pronunciation. Mihalyi, first name. Ooh. Last name, Csikszentmihalyi. Csikszentmihalyi.
Holy crap, that is a stunning last name.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Does it have every letter in the alphabet? No,
it's close. It's almost a quick brown fox jumped over a lazy dog. It's really
reference. Good reference.
Millard's going crazy, my dog behind me. So he wrote in The Flow in 1990, which is this theory that he has on the flow state, which some of you have heard about this kind of flow state. And what it is it's a chart. And so on one axis of this chart is kind of challenge. So the ways that how challenged you feel. The other one is skill. So how skilled you are at something. So when the challenge is too high for your skill, you start to feel anxious or stressed. So if I were to say, Wade, there's a car outside. I need you to take apart the engine and put it back together in 2 hours. That is not something that you would probably have the skill for, and the challenge would be too high. So that would be pretty stressful if I asked you to do that. But on the other side, if the challenge is too low, but your skill is too high, that creates boredom or apathy. So if I was to say, Wade, I need you to go outside and I need you to count the blades of grass in your yard, you would get pretty bored and apathetic of that activity, right? But he says when skill appropriately matches challenge, that's where you're in the sweet spot. And what he observed in his research was you can get into what he called a flow state around that, where you kind of lose track of time a little bit. It feels like there's this window where you can be appropriately challenged with the appropriate skill, and you will grow and not feel overly anxious and stressed, and you won't feel bored. So we have the ability to understand and steward the level of difficulty and our skill set in the way that we play games and in life. What do you think about that?
I love it, first of all, and I think that it does mirror my own experience of games. I have a couple of questions. Challenge, is that static? Challenge does not change for something.
So the level of challenge would be depending on the activity. So like if we quantify it 0 through 10, right? You would just plot it kind of on a chart. So you would say, what's the challenge level of this activity? And challenge would be different, for each person too, right? Because it's your skill set and your perception or experience with the challenge. It's not necessarily universal.
But for an activity or something like that, a challenge is kind of set in stone, but the skill set of the person is the variable there, to a degree.
Yeah.
So it may not be challenging, but it really that challenge is always a level 7 if we were to quantify it. But your skill set may not match that level 7. You may be a level 5, or you may be a level 10, which is going to create anxiety or boredom as a result. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting piece there, because especially as we're talking about games like Elden Ring or Lies of P, especially the Shadow of the Erdtree stuff, there's this sense that every challenge is like a 10, and it probably isn't, right? I haven't played much of it at this point, but this is where that whole concept of get good comes in, or what skills or resources have you not unlocked? There's a gameplay loop that demands you rise to the occasion, rise to the challenge. And so you level up, or you work on your reaction time and all of those kind of things. I think this is a really interesting and helpful thing, but I do think that it's helpful to also think of a challenge as static and skills as the variable there.
Yeah, well, I think you look at the opportunity, and you can't change the challenge in life of some things necessarily.
Yeah.
Now in games, this is what's interesting. You can bump up or down the difficulty. So in
For a
that
lot of
case,
games.
challenge becomes static, right? Same activity, but you're just lowering the difficulty, or you're breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and making it more approachable.
Right.
So this is an interesting thing. When we talk about games, I'm going to sneeze. This is an interesting thing. This is an interesting thing because when we talk about games, they steward you in your skill versus the challenge they can present themselves to you.
Yeah.
So really great games, typically, to be more approachable, will try and give you a tutorial and then slowly ramp up what you do and what you experience so that you don't get overwhelmed. Older games did not do this as much, and there are some modern games that just throw you right in too. But do you have some examples or things that come to mind when you think about games who ramp that challenge and skill well together and kind of increase your competency as you go?
I mean, I think that the classic example is Mario Brothers.
Okay.
Right. I mean, it scales immediately. It's got an unspoken tutorial of jumping on the Goomba's head or whatever. But the the further you go, you're learning techniques along the way that are going to be necessary in later levels. I think it's a masterclass in game design. But modern games do this as well. And I think that they do iterate on that same thing. I mean, it is true with that, like Elden Ring. Have you played Elden Ring by chance?
No.
No. Okay. So Elden Ring starts you out. I mean, you can die in the tutorial easily.
Yeah.
But you can also skip the tutorial entirely because it looks like a hole that you would die in because of gravity,
Sure.
which is my greatest enemy in a game.
Gravity.
You follow any of my stream? Yeah, there's a running joke that Isaac Newton is my final boss.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and it's true. Like I've got words for him for creating gravity. So
Let me know when you talk to him.
I will. So there can be only one.
Wait, did you just Highlander Isaac Newton?
I sure did. Me or Isaac Newton.
I'm going to find you, Isaac Newton. There can only be one.
So, but with Elden Ring, I mean, you're fighting these grunt skeleton zombie looking guys, and then you make your way up to these dragons. But if you can't kill the former, and know all of the techniques, the dodging, the kind of staggering system, and all that kind of stuff, you're really going to have a hard time with some of these later things. What game does it well for you?
Well, I'm playing God of War Ragnarok, like we talked about, and I'm really enjoying it. But that's the game that I'm just kind of focused on the mechanics right now. So I'll speak to that. It does some interesting things. It ramps you up really well. It limits you having too many move sets to make you use the moves that you have, and then introduces more complicated mechanics as the game goes on. So it feels really fresh. Because I get really overwhelmed by just like a giant move set. Like if we're playing fighting games and somebody pulls up the like controls menu and you see all the different buttons and they're just displayed on a long list, I just look at that and I'm like, I don't really know where to start. So it does a good job holding you back and kind of gating you from trying out too many skills, because you learn to appreciate what you like and don't like kind of along the way. So it trickles those out. So that was good. And the other way that it mitigates difficulty is if you enter into a zone and you die, but you didn't have full health, when you respawn, it'll give you health back. So that's kind of a soft thing that I've noticed, is that they'll say, well, maybe the reason you died is because you went into this fight with 25% health. So when you respawn, we'll give you 100% health. And most of the time, that's kind of enough to kind of see it through.
You played the first one, regular God of War.
I did.
I'm assuming, because it's like a direct sequel, right? But as far as difficulty is concerned, did you feel like Ragnarok picks up at a higher level of difficulty than the first one, or does it also tutorialize you in the same way that the first one did?
I think it does a better job than the first one. I think it limits your abilities because you don't start with all your stuff. At the end of the first game, you have all your stuff unlocked and everything like that. So you launch into the second game and you don't. You're kind of starting over. You do have some of the weapons and things like that that you've unlocked right away, but it caps you back and kind of starts you over. I think if you played the first one, you could understand the combat mechanics a little bit, but those are also improved in the second one that they've done. Like the timings are better, the performance is better, because you're looking at like a late gen PS4 game that was really asking everything it could of the PS4 versus kind of a launch-ish title on the PS5. So the performance in itself just makes everything a little more clear and easy to understand. But I think it kind of starts you over. I mean, it even has like a God of War 1 recap, just in case you haven't played in a while or done it. So I was pretty impressed with it.
Good. Have you ever experienced the Mario Maker custom levels?
Yes, that is.
What are those called? Kaizo? Kaizu's like Godzilla. There's a specific...
Kaiju would be Godzilla.
Okay, Kaiju.
Well, that's the name.
I know, but like, I'm trying to think what the Mario levels are called.
Like really difficult ones?
I think it's called Kaizu or Kaizo.
What's a really
Let's Google this.
Difficult Mario Maker level called?
I think it's called Kaizo. That's my final answer. And I may be misspelling that.
I can't find a name for it.
Okay, let me find out.
You do some research and I'll talk about it.
So but these levels are like brutally, crushingly difficult.
Yeah.
Right?
A Souls-like Mario level.
Yeah, it's a Souls-like Mario.
Let's explain that for those who, because this show is for people who love games and also for people who love games. So we try and make sure that we break down some of those things. So a Souls-like game refers to a specific style of game, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, where you have a high level of difficulty and some pretty raw mechanics, and it takes a lot of, I will just say, sadistic pleasure in the level of difficulty that you have. So to beat those games, you do have to have like an understanding and a high mechanical skill. That's not a perfect definition, but it's a good working definition so that you could be caught up. So Souls-like game means it's just kind of a more action-oriented, punishing game. That's it. Now I'd say I gave a worse definition at the end, but go ahead.
Kaizo, as specified by Wikipedia, meaning modification, rebuild, or reconfiguration, is a philosophy of game design, specifically platforming games, distinguished by a high degree of strictness placed upon the player's intended actions and movements through a level. This is also called hard AF, right? Like, this is just like the worst. It is the hardest freaking thing. It's like you've got to get on the turtle's back and take the shell, then kick it against a wall, and then bounce off the shell again to avoid spikes. I mean, it's madness.
So how does difficulty impact your sense of accomplishment then as a player?
So with that particular thing, I cannot beat those levels.
Okay.
Like, I've beaten one level in my life, a Kaizo level. I don't even remember which one it was because I blocked it from my memory because I didn't really have that much of a fun time with it.
Okay.
Like, it really was frustrating for me, but I did beat it. And it was like the challenge far exceeded my skill. And I think that the thing that was frustrating to me there was that I jumped into this particular one without having any kind of tutorialization. So there was no way for my skills to improve. So maybe that's the key, right? A game is too hard if it doesn't provide the resources needed for your skills to improve.
Yeah, or if that's not the challenge you're seeking out. Right? Some people like to be thrown in like, I think of anybody who plays the game type that's like a bullet hell game. A bullet hell game is a game that just throws a lot of things at you and you have to fight and dodge around at the same time. So imagine you're on like a tennis court and there's like 20 players with tennis rackets and tennis balls on the other side,
Yeah.
and your job is to run around the tennis court and not get hit by a tennis ball. Bullet hell game is like 20 people just pelting you with tennis balls the whole time, and so it's hard to navigate. You're just dodging around. So some people like that. They intentionally place themselves in that kind of vulnerable position because they like the challenge that it heightens them to. But I think
that's fair.
I think we have to talk about different types of difficulty, because we're typically referring to like mechanical difficulty, but difficulty manifests itself in some other ways. Mechanical skill is one way that we think about it with games, kind of that fast twitch, like, 360 no scope, like all those things, right? That I can move the controller and my character on the screen will move, and I react. My reaction time is good. The hand-eye coordination. But I think there's strategy difficulty, right? There's creative difficulty in games that you have to be kind of more creative in the way that you solve problems. There's consistency as difficulty. So investment over time and your ability to develop that kind of investment in your character over time, and discipline, that's a difficulty. There's social difficulty where you have to coordinate with other players. So if you have better organization or social skills, I'm thinking specifically of like World of Warcraft guilds or other
Dawn
MMOs,
Trail,
right? Where you have these different kinds of difficulties. And I think that's been an interesting thing that's happened in games, is that difficulty can be perceived in some other ways. So when we look at difficulty for this example, and for us as ones who are exploring the topic, I think make sure that we're recognizing what kind of difficulty we like to experience, because there's a chance that if you're stressed or bored and the game isn't doing anything about it, you might need to try and find some other games, or think about games in a different way, in the way that you want to explore that difficulty and that challenge.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. For example, right now I'm playing Lies of P to prepare myself for Shadow of the Erdtree. So,
which is the Elden Ring expansion.
Elden Ring DLC, yeah. And so I knew that Elden Ring was coming out with this DLC, and that's why I chose Lies of P to kind of get myself back into it. I probably would have done better to have just played Elden Ring again, but I am liking Lies of P until last night. I still like it. I'm just motivated.
So what do you do when you encounter this in real life? Because I think this is where we can make the games as a practice for real life and really grow in life from games. When you experience something stressful in games, or when you experience boredom because you're not being challenged enough, and you see that in your life, like you experience stress or anxiety, how can this give us a framework to really try and provide some language to understand what's going on in our lives, and really let other people into it as well after we have that self-awareness? Because I think this could be really valuable personally and professionally too, because it gives some language to be able to practice that as we kind of go into our lives.
You want to hit something like really like personal and intense. I have found, not just from my life, but from everybody I talk to, that around age 35, something happens to all of us that have kind of gone through the traditional means of school, job, work life, all that kind of stuff. But about 35, you get into a routine, some might even say a rut. And it's like, is this all there is? I can do this stuff with my eyes shut, especially if you don't have kids or anything like that, which I think is a whole other component of difficulty and challenge, perhaps. But when it comes to your job and your work, this is where you get the pre-midlife crisis. Some would say it's the midlife crisis, but I think that we've had to extend it a little bit beyond this. But at 35, you begin to say, is this it? And you start to get restless. So you're looking at new job opportunities. And I've done this, right? I'm like, what else can I do? In some ways, that's how I started working as an instructor at Bama,
Yeah.
Because I was looking for new challenges, because what I was currently doing just wasn't feeding the challenge. It doesn't mean that I was like the best in the world at what I was doing. It just means that the opportunity was no longer giving the challenge that demanded such attention.
How did you recognize that?
Probably not in the most healthy of ways. I think
the awareness, I think the awareness of these things typically isn't going to always come upon a healthy discovery.
No,
Typically, we talked
no.
about the intensity provides a window at the beginning of this
Yeah.
episode, where we say the intensity of something can provide a window into what's going on behind the scenes. And so a lot of the time, I think we have to be kind to ourselves a little bit, that sometimes we won't know that we're not regulating until we have a
Yeah.
more intense experience. Sorry, continue.
No, it's a great point, and I think to be specific about it, I felt restless. I
Okay.
wasn't in my flow, like your chart says. I wasn't in my flow, and therefore I was bored, and it manifested as a restlessness that made me short-tempered with others.
Hmm.
In a way of like, you dummy, like I can do this in my sleep. Like, come on, like you're asking questions that
Sure.
like
Yeah.
so it's a shortness, it's a curtness that I had to like gut check myself on. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, what's really going on here? And I realized I was bored. And I was resenting my station in life as a result of that. So that I couldn't be content.
Yeah.
I felt like I was resigning to something. And so I had to rethink all of that for myself. But that was a big red flag for me. Like, hey, this is not, we talk about recovering our lost selves.
Mm-hmm.
I was losing myself.
Oh.
And so to wake up to that, it's like, okay, how can I recover? If my station, as far as my job or my point in life or whatever, can't change, what can I supplement that with to allow the interest, the challenge, the intrigue that I'm currently missing? And that's what I did. And that's why we're here, I think.
Yeah, I think it is too. So you recognized that through some adverse reactions to things that you felt
Yeah.
like maybe weren't within your true self,
Yeah.
that you really needed to have some different challenge to pull your scale up, to understand what that is. As we kind of start to wrap up this segment, to make it practical for folks, you're a big
Yep.
goal setter when it
I
comes
am. Yeah,
to
big time.
life and everything. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how understanding skill and challenge incorporates with the ways that you kind of set goals, how it helps you memorialize and keep track
Yeah.
of progress, and just kind of give us like a practical challenge as we close out
Oh,
this segment.
this is huge, right? I mean, I operate off of experience points and leveling up. And so life doesn't give us experience points and level up markers, so you create your own for yourself. For me personally, I use a journal called the Full Focus Planner. It's great, but it gives you 90-day goals. It gives you like weekly goals, or it helps you set 90-day goals,
Yeah.
weekly goals, and then 3 daily tasks to accomplish. You set those yourself. And so for me, it's like, did I accomplish these 3 tasks? How far did I get on my weekly task? How far am I on my monthly and my 90-day tasks or goals? And that to me fuels just enough of a challenge that keeps me from getting bored and also keeps me focused and on point. Because no matter how restless or bored I may be, I still have goals for my life. I still have overarching dreams that I want to accomplish. But if I'm just sitting in, I use this phrase frequently, if I sit in the suck, if I sit in the bad of where I am, the restlessness, then I'm never going to move forward. So what can I do just today, not worrying about next week or beyond, what can I do today that's going to cater toward my future?
I love that. Let's take it down to its very basics for someone who has a hard time setting goals in this season of their life. Let's take that 90-day planner and do it into one page, one thing. How would you encourage somebody to get started with the goal setting? Like, how would you set that goal? And then 2, how would you celebrate, and the importance of celebrating when you've accomplished it?
It's important to remember that your destination is planned by your intention. But even more than your intention, it is determined by your direction. And if you're not daily directing yourself toward your destination, or at least weekly or monthly or whatever, if you don't have a concept of where that destination is, you're never going to get there. Somebody wise once told me, unless you see it before you see it, you're never going to see it. And so you've got to have a vision of your destination, where you want to go. So what that means is determine where it is you want to be, where you want to go. And then try to set some challenges, some goals for yourself. Now, here's the important thing. I love the second part of your question. once you find these tangible sort of things, apply to 7 jobs this week, or apply for grants if you're in research, or whatever it is. Work out 5 out of 7 days. Go on a 30-minute walk. Celebrate that. Now, if it's an exercise goal, I wouldn't say, go to an all-you-can-eat ice cream buffet or something like that. That's probably counterproductive to that, but celebrate it. So, for example, I've got a goal right now that is writing a chapter of a book, and I know that I'm going to go out to a nice dinner in an area city when I finish that with some friends to celebrate that. And I'm not going to let myself do that before I finish that chapter of this book.
Perfect. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. As we kind of wrap up, I want to say thanks for listening to this segment. Don't forget, hear that voice in your head. Do you need to take a break? And when you hear that voice, you have some tools and skill sets that you could do to understand why you're feeling and experiencing the things that you're experiencing, as to know when you aren't having fun anymore and understanding the way that you like to be challenged. See you next segment. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time in the episode where we take a break and get to know each other a little bit better. That would be our mini game stretch break. Wait, let's hit the music. 2, 3, 4. I caught up at the end there.
You sure did. I feel like we're nailing it more and more.
As a musician, knowing when to come back in is, just as important as skillful playing. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is our mini game stretch break where we take a break and stretch. And you should too. So, wherever you're listening or watching this, just be good to your body. Take a second, stretch, do a couple neck stretches, do a little shoulder roll like Wade is.
I got a little thing in my shoulder today.
Yeah. You got to work it out. I tell you what, I get those Apple Fitness notifications from you, and you're just a fiend. You just
the over gains before games.
I know. Right? Hey, that's not the segment. That segment's at the end.
No, it's not. It's not. You got to rest before games sometimes if you've overworked. So
in our mini game stretch break, that means we will consult our wonderful, as you can see on the screen, bingo wheel of vulnerability. Bingo wheel of vulnerability. Very good. There's numbers 1 through 50 in here. Wade has some Geek Therapy cards. Introduce the cards for everybody and give a shout out.
Geek Therapy, Geek Therapeutics card deck. These are questions and practices to improve thoughts, build insight, take action in your life, and to de-stress.
Shout out. They're in the show notes. Check it out. Okay, so I'm going to spin this bingo wheel 1 through 50. Wade and I are each going to guess a number. And listener viewer, we would encourage you to try and guess a number 1 through 50 and see if you get it right. And if you get it right, tell us in the comments. Don't lie. All right, ready? Tell me when to stop.
And
we got to guess our numbers.
Yeah, 50.
Oh, wow.
The number of times I died in Lies of P last night.
Oh, dude, that was tough. Okay, I'm going to guess 17.
17.
All right, here it is. It is 38.
38. Got it.
So, listener, if you guessed 38, you win. So, count out 38 cards. And we learned a lesson in our last episode.
We did.
Where we interviewed Matt, where if we have a multiple question Geek Therapy card, we're just going to pick 1 or 2 of them and not answer a 5-parter.
Well, you're in luck. This one only has 1 question.
Okay, great. Hit us with it.
The topic is movies and TV. Advanced space pioneers are usually forbidden from interfering with the problems of other civilizations due to the threat of changing the natural law and outcome of the species.
Keep going.
Name 3 times when it is better not to get involved with others, and how could that interference possibly make the problem worse?
Okay, that
Name
sounds good.
3 times
let's come up with 3
when
together.
It is better not to get involved with others. Okay.
3 times it's better not to get involved with others.
With others.
Okay.
Because it could potentially make the problem worse, interference-wise.
Well, drowning.
You wouldn't save someone drowning?
Well, you're not supposed to get close. You're supposed to help in different ways. So,
drowning. Wow.
Or you're supposed to throw something or keep, because they'll latch onto you. And I experienced that actually with you when we were at Alabama, and we had a student who didn't know how to swim but didn't say that they didn't know how to swim, and they were wearing a life
Oh.
jacket, and they got launched off the blob, and they weren't sinking, they were fine, but I was wearing a life jacket and they were wearing a life jacket, and I swam to them and I was like, hey, you're good, like, let's get you over here. And they grabbed onto me, and I swear to you, if we weren't both wearing life jackets, they would have drowned me.
That is harrowing.
You're supposed to keep them. Yeah, you're supposed to keep them at length. For those of you who are listening, I'm putting my arms out. So yeah, checking lifeguard training. But that's not an actual one. That was just the first one that came to mind.
My dad always told me that you're supposed to hit them hard enough to knock them out and then drag them to shore.
Yeah, I mean, if you're that strong, I don't know if
I mean, I don't know. That's why we work out, so we can incapacitate somebody while they're drowning.
Can you imagine you're just at the gym working out, and then somebody's like, "Oh, wow, what are your goals?" And I'm like, "One shot. I need to be able to knock out a drowning person with one punch."
Don't call me a hero.
Okay, best not to get involved.
I have found when your friends, plural, are in a romantic relationship, and they're in a spat, like a fight or something like that, just don't get involved. You can listen, maybe, but just don't.
Yeah, that's very true. I would say don't get involved in random tech support, especially over the phone. Like if somebody needs help, like a family member called and they're like, "Hey, I can't figure this out on my phone." Like, don't.
That's pretty good. You're gonna get dragged into it, but yeah, also.
Here's a funny story. This is a good one. I would say don't get involved if you don't have the competence to actually help the problem. Like, don't get involved just because you want to be helpful. I was at an electronics store with a friend picking up something for a work project, and there was it's a great story. And there was a person who was looking at these racing wheels. And they're like sim rig racing wheels, and they were speaking Portuguese to this electronics store employee, and they didn't really understand and whatever. And I just like to be helpful, but I'm also an idiot, right? Like I don't think I'm very stupid. And so I only know one phrase in Portuguese, and it's because my roommate in college took Portuguese. So the only thing I know how to say is, "Do you speak Portuguese?"
Oh no.
And so I am just like, I want to be helpful. And so I walk up and I say, this is Nick, who designed our graphics, one of his favorite stories. He was the one who was with me. And so I just say, "I falo Portuguese. Do you speak Portuguese?" She then turns to me, thinking that she's been rescued by someone who's going to be able to actually help translate what's happening here.
No.
And she just goes off in Portuguese. And I just look at her and I let her finish. And I go, "Oh, I don't speak Portuguese." And Nick is like ducks around the aisle. So I would say, don't just jump in to be helpful just to be helpful. Make sure that you have the actual competence to be able to assist with the problem, not just wanting to feel helpful. Do you think that counts?
I think that very much counts. I guess for a third one.
Yeah, we'll put the third one together.
The third one, you're not really on social media too much.
Try not to be.
Yeah, it's probably better for you. But I found it to be incredibly unhelpful when on my For You page or suggested posts or whatever, there is some sort of crisis or dilemma that's being debated, and I chime in.
Oh, you don't need to third party the comments?
I don't need to third party the comments. Like, that's something I'm potentially making it worse. And yeah, just don't do it. Some things is just like, that's not my problem, and I'm going to keep going.
Okay, so there you go, listener. So there's a question that you can ask people in your life that you can connect with. What is something that you just shouldn't get involved in? What's a bad idea for some things to get involved in? There's a little get to know you question around the lunch, dinner table, whatever table you find yourself in. You're only allowed to have conversations at tables, apparently.
You know what the problem is
What's
with
the
the
problem?
Twitter conversations?
Uh-huh.
You can't knock them out and drag them to shore.
That's so true. That's so true. You can't.
That would solve so many problems if I could just like chokehold somebody and then drag their unconscious body to safety.
Well, let's do Elon's job for him. How much would you pay for that on Twitter if you knew that you could like super like something and someone would come and physically restrain the person who was tweeting?
It would make Twitter Blue Premium worth it, I would say. I think that's $16 a month. I'd pay that.
Twitter Blue, including private security.
No. Just the ability to reach through the device
Okay.
and knock someone out.
Okay, so
for
like
the purpose
ring.
of
So
like, but
want...
it's for the purpose of saving them. I don't want to injure them, but
sure.
I'm dragging them out like a drowning victim.
Oh,
because they're drowning in the comments.
You're saying you have to stop. You have to stop what you're doing. It's so much that I'm going to pay to be able to rescue you through the screen.
Like it's really it's a benevolence sort of feature.
Well, now you know a little bit more about Wade and I from our minigame stretch break. Enjoy getting to know each other. Wade, thanks. On to the next segment. All right, Wade, time to get into our next segment. We know that the things that we do for fun and our hobbies improve our mood and make us feel better, right? I mean, you said, I just need a break. I need to go have some fun. I need to play some games. I need to blow off some steam. But do you ever wonder why that is exactly, or are you just satisfied with the results of your recreation?
You know, I'm 3 days away from going on my summer vacation right now, and this has kind of been on my mind. When I was younger, I guess, I was just like, let me do things that alleviate my mindset and all that kind of stuff. But if you've ever gone on vacation and you felt more overwhelmed by the end of it, and you're like, what happened? I was supposed to be rejuvenated, re-energized, all that kind of stuff. You start to think about, okay, how can I structure my vacation time a little bit better moving forward? So yeah, I do think about this.
How often do you go on vacation and then come back unsatisfied? That sounds like it's a regular occurrence for you.
You know, sometimes I like vacations to be a little bit more active.
Yeah.
Like I like to go hiking or biking or whatever it is, climbing, experiencing something new. But I tend to go on vacation occasionally with members of my family who would rather not do those things. And so like if you're just sitting on a beach, listen, that's awesome.
Yeah.
For like a day or two. But I need a little bit of adventure. And like everybody around me and my family members, they're like, I feel so refreshed and relaxed. And I'm like, I am antsy. I got to get out of the house. I got to like go do something. And so that's what I'm talking about. It just wasn't that same level of rejuvenation. And I think that's, you know, paying attention to how we're hardwired differently from each other in some ways. So
yeah, you definitely have your more active folks. You have your, I'll call them loungers.
Loungers, what a nice thing to say. Yeah.
And then, you know, everybody has a balance in between. So if we're talking about vacation and the importance of feeling refreshed and regulating our mood, how do you think that pertains to video games? And how can we think about video games as little mini vacations to kind of help us do that well?
Yeah, so you know, it's July. It's going to be, you know, hot weather for a lot of North America, all that kind of stuff. We're thinking about getting away. We're thinking about relaxing.
Yeah.
Our traditional fall to spring schedule is interrupted to a degree. Things are just a little bit slower in the summer. And so we're all thinking about these kind of things. But the reality is that not all of us are going to be able to go across the world to some exotic destination. Now, we might be able to have some time off work and all that kind of stuff. The reason this is pertinent for this show is because gaming, like a lot of hobbies, gaming can offer a window into a vacation that we might not ordinarily afford. And we've known this about gaming for years and years, because anybody that plays any kind of game, especially a role-playing game, you are transporting yourself into another world, another reality, And there are cognitive and emotional benefits to doing that.
Okay, so you're saying this is kind of like a deluxe staycation?
Oh, absolutely it is. It's a deluxe staycation that you can enjoy from the comfort of your own home, right?
Okay. So if we're working off this idea that video games offer us the ability to engage in a kind of vacation that we normally couldn't afford, and I think when we talk about afford, sure, financially, but I think it's also an economy of time too.
Yeah.
Gaming can quickly get you into a new environment that you feel immersed and engaged in. Is there some research or any writing that has explored this topic?
Yeah. I think that also when we think of vacations, we think of these multi-day, week or multi-week even trips or experiences. But I think that more often than not, when we think about gaming, we think of them as one and done sort of things. And so, what I'd like to think about in this segment is how can a game be a mini vacation? And this is not something that I created. In 2020, there was a book released edited by Barbaros Boston. The name of the book is called Game User Experience and Player-Centered Design. Now, the entire book is pretty incredible, but it's all research based. It's a series of research. Some would be fodder for dissertations, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the chapter that really compelled me to think about this is chapter 4 of this book. And it's titled this, just a great chapter title. It's called Four Pillars of Healthy Escapism in Games.
Say that
Four
again.
pillars. Yeah, four pillars of healthy escapism in games. What we're ultimately talking about with video gaming and how it is going to impact our well-being and offer those psychosocial benefits that we're wanting, we're talking about escapism. Now, escapism gets a bad rap, right?
Okay, tell me
When we
why.
think about escapism, we're thinking about ignoring life and escaping away to a fantasy reality, right? We're ignoring responsibilities, we're removing ourselves from whatever it is.
Okay.
But escapism is not necessarily inherently a bad thing. There's healthy escapism and there's unhealthy escapism. Too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing, right? And so that's why this chapter title I think is so good. Four pillars of healthy escapism in games. And the authors, Mehmet Kosa and Ahmet Uysal, I hope that I'm pronouncing those right.
We'll do our best.
Yeah, we do our best and forget the rest, right? This is a great essay, a great article or chapter on kind of offering some areas that we can attend to in our gaming life. But let me ask you, I mean, have you ever experienced a game where your mood or your life felt like it was more enriched as a result of that game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think both sides of that are true as well, right? Like I've experienced
Yeah.
frustration in games and
Yeah.
it wanted to move to something a little cozier, but it makes me think about like challenge level and just the immersion, like that kind of flows that you lose yourself in it when
Yeah.
you get into a really good game and you kind of lose track of time. That's kind of the way, that's a marker that I know that I'm hitting on that, where I feel like I'm kind of transported, is that I look down and a lot of time has passed.
Yeah.
It happened to me not too long ago with God of War. I was playing God of
Mm.
War Ragnarok and I just sat there. And then when I looked at the clock, it was no joke, like 3 hours later. And I was just having
Yeah.
a fantastic time. And I felt alert and engaged and re-energized, and that game does a really good job of stewarding your time as well. So yeah, that's probably my most recent experience. What about for you?
The game I go back to again and again, I think it was not just me, it was a worldwide phenomenon, right? In 2020 Animal Crossing.
Okay.
This was a much needed vacation in a world that was falling apart. I mean, the pandemic, COVID was in full swing, and I don't remember March, I guess, of that year, as things were shutting down and there was all
Yeah.
this uncertainty. Animal Crossing is released, and it gave me and so many others a window to escape this weird uncertainty of reality, to go and plant crops and to make friends with a duck that keeps drowning in the ocean
And
after
you did a lot of fishing.
I did a lot of fishing, like I do in all games.
You love to fish in games.
I love fishing. Yeah.
Here's a question about your Animal Crossing pandemic experience. I remember that you held some sort of Easter service in Animal Crossing. Yeah. I wonder if you could speak to that for a minute.
Yeah,
I think that's the ultimate escape.
Yeah, so a lot of people know that I've got a history in religious life and all that kind of stuff. And so Easter Sunday morning comes up, and I had this idea. I was like, let's just host an Easter service on my Animal Crossing island. So I invited some real life friends, and they showed up, and it was amazing. You can actually find the video of this on my YouTube and watch it in its entirety. It's ridiculous. But like 7 friends and a waiting list.
Yeah.
Showed up, because you could only have 8 people on your island, including yourself. So many people showed up from real life. Jesus showed up. Somebody cosplayed Jesus with a halo over his head, and like didn't tell anybody that he was coming dressed like Jesus. And so he gets off the plane and comes to the island, and everyone is like, he is risen. He is risen indeed. And there he is. He's with us. It was incredible. So he comes in, but he sits on the front row. I was like, do you want to lead the service? Jesus was like, no, I'm good. But we had like little instruments all over the place. Like on my island, it took me like a week, but what else did we have going? It was a pandemic.
Yeah.
I crafted pews made of like little tree benches.
Yeah.
I made a pulpit. Somebody from another island shipped me like exports from their island for instruments and sound systems and all this kind of stuff. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
You had an AV contractor.
I had an AV contractor from off island, but the service happens. Jesus shows up. We're all there. I give an order of the service where it's like, hey, everybody, I want to welcome you, and especially you, Jesus, guest of honor. And we're experiencing this. So I'm like reading a few liturgies that I found. We have 2 or 3 songs. And like the way you do it in Animal Crossing is you can play something on the radio or a record player. And if you play an instrument while that music's playing, it auto-tunes to it.
Stop.
Okay. So like I've got a guitar, a piano, drums, and everybody. It's like, okay, time for our first song. Everybody gets up off the pews and they go to their instruments, and we're just like going for it. And then people that are singing are just furiously typing like, praise him, or he is risen. And it's like, we got music and song.
How many people?
There were 8 people because and a waiting list. I had other.
That's a full Animal Crossing Easter service.
That was a cap. And I had 3 or 4 people that were like, hey, can somebody leave so we can come in
the
and
overflow
experience
room.
The resurrection. I was like, no, sorry, you can't. I wasn't even streaming at this point back then. So one of the coolest things, then I'll shut up about this.
Don't shut up about it. It's amazing.
You know how in a lot of religious services there will be like the token candle that you light to signify the presence or the power of the divine.
Sure.
I had a tiki torch, and I said, "Let there be light, and let us welcome the light of God into our hearts." And I lit the tiki torch, and people were like. They like did the clapping emote. It was great. And then at the end of the service, this was maybe my favorite part. I said, and so today we remember he is risen. We remember this. I said, but also remember who you are and remember your baptism. And I took out a watering flower pail and I doused everybody with the water. And people were again like, even Jesus.
The quote of that is, so Jesus gets off the plane.
So Jesus gets off the plane. It was one of the best experiences. But again, it was this moment of vacation and reprieve in the midst of a time when we couldn't escape. We couldn't escape the dire nature of the pandemic. And it was one of those mood altering moments for me that was just like, gaming has elevated to another level.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing and catching everyone up. If you're listening on the podcast and you can't see him, he's grinning ear to ear. He's never been happier.
Top 10 moment of my life, I think. It was so good. So I would stack it up against any religious service I've ever been to.
And you can check it out on the YouTube channel. So we'll probably make sure to include a link to that in the description there. So recentering us back on the research, I'm going to introduce the title and organize us back towards that. So you said this. We're going to talk about video game vacation. 4 ways to ensure that gaming re-energizes you. 4 ways to ensure that gaming re-energizes you. I wonder if we could get started looking at some of those 4 categories. What are they?
Yeah, Kosa and Uysal, they specify 4 different pillars that are inherent in kind of game-related emotional well-being. And the first of those 4 is emotional regulation. That begs to be defined a little bit. Emotional regulation, they say, is defined by the attempt of modifying the trajectory of one's emotions. Okay? It is the attempt of modifying the trajectory of one's emotions.
Okay.
Right?
What does it mean to modify the trajectory? Attempting. That's interesting that it says attempting to modify the trajectory of your emotions. So if I was going to break this down, I have to first recognize that my emotions exist and have a trajectory, determine what that trajectory is, and then make an attempt to modify it. Is that how you would?
Yeah, I think so. Trajectory, for a JRPG fan out there, I know that we've got some listeners that are that. It's the idea of destiny and defying fate or defying destiny.
All right.
You are on a trajectory towards sadness. What does it look like to attempt to modify that trajectory? And this is something that games can do according to the research. That's not my opinion. This is actual research that says that we can make an attempt to defy destiny, the trajectory of our emotions, through the agency offered in games. Pretty cool stuff.
That's an empowering statement.
Yeah, it is.
I wonder what the next step in application is for that. If we talk about how we want to take the things that we experience and play and in games and use it to test and improve on some things in our lives that aren't present on the screen or the page, what would that look like?
Fantasy imitates reality. And in the same ways, practice is a form of fantasy. Practice makes perfect. Okay. And so as you are living into something, even in practice, when it's game time, your real life, you're going to be able to implement those things. So here's what the research also says. There's a platform for emotional regulation in games to take place as games are vast playgrounds for players to select and modify situations to their liking. Games are also effective for distraction, providing temporary disengagement from negative and undesirable emotions, emotions that are likely accrued and accumulated in the real world. And so you get a playground where you can test, where you can practice, where you can create a new reality in this safe zone of a game space to redirect your life in your real world. So, for instance, if something's not to your liking in a game, you're problem solving in real time to manipulate it into something that's more pleasing to you. That skill set is a transferable skill set that you'll begin to regulate in your actual emotional world outside the game. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. They use the language like negative emotions. I have been told that there's no such thing as negative emotions in the way that they're thinking about how we understand them. There's just emotions that we assign negative feelings towards, that emotions just are. They aren't good, they aren't bad. We have to acknowledge that they just exist. And then when we acknowledge that they just exist, we can accept them and be able to actually engage with them. And so do you think that that plays into like the emotions that are typically perceived as negative? Would you?
Yeah, I think that's a good qualifier. You know, it's the emotion that is causing a negative reaction within you.
Yeah,
and
there
so
you go.
we know that sadness has an important piece. I mean, if you've seen Inside Out 1, you know sadness has a role. You can't just dismiss it. But
spoilers.
But is there is there a way to identify the emotion in you that is creating a negative response? And can you redirect that in a healthier or proper space.
Yeah, and we can use games and play to be able to have a safe place to practice that. Okay,
Now,
so
this is something that I do want to add that the research mentions, and we could talk for days about this one. But it says that initial findings also show, this is so cool, that regular or frequent gamers use emotional regulation strategies better than irregular or infrequent gamers. How cool is that? So if you are a more frequent, regular gamer, you are developing emotional regulation strategies and able to employ those things better than if you were an infrequent gamer. So if you're a hardcore gamer, guess what? There's good news for your emotional regulation.
and you've probably been doing it subconsciously. And so
Yeah,
this
totally.
is really thinking intentionally about pulling that out of our subconscious and making it something that we can kind of memorialize and live into, which is, I think, goes into some of the aspects of a vacation, right?
Yeah.
Vacation, you take a lot of pictures, you're in a new environment, you're more receptive to new changes, you're more aware of your surroundings, those kinds of things. I mean, there's special things that you do just on vacation, and there's a reason that things stick out and we make more memories typically when we're on vacation, because we do that. And so video games help transport us to that. What's our next category?
Mood management. Mood management. So mood management, think more in terms of think more in terms of a bit more of a long-term sort of thing. If emotional management is moment to moment, mood management is more about your long-term emotional state.
Okay, so like an arc. The arc
An
of your
arc, for
emotions.
example.
Okay.
So again, your emotions in the moment set a trajectory for an overarching mood. That's important to know. Okay.
Your emotions in the moment set the arc of the trajectory for your overall mood.
For your overall mood. Okay. So let me read a little bit of the research here. I think this is really, really cool. The research shows that games provide a useful medium for this mood management. For instance, playing violent or non-violent games helps reduce hostility and enhance positive effects. However, understanding which aspects of games makes them more effective for mood management is important. Rigorous experiments show that the player agency increases in a game. Mood of the bored and stressed individuals tend to improve as well. And players prefer medium-level tasks rather than low or high task demand. I think that's kind of interesting because it's the idea of there's a fulfillment piece that is generally helping not only that trajectory, but that overall emotional state that you are in.
It talked about two different types of tasks towards the end there. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about what that means. Like, I think it said medium task versus
something that's cripplingly difficult or something that is mindlessly easy. So there's something with medium level engagement. All right. This is for all of our developer friends out there. This is the key to side quests. Okay. A fetch quest ain't cutting it, and there's science-backed research as to why it doesn't cut it, because it's not challenging enough. Now, if it's too challenging, you've missed the mark. But right there's a sweet spot in the middle, and that is the task of every game dev.
Do you think your perfect torturous side quest would be an escort quest with bad pathing AI combined with a fetch quest?
Yeah, and like they're painfully slow. Oh, or this is worse. This is worse. When the escort quest giver moves slower than your run speed, but faster than your walk speed. Like it doesn't match your speed at all. It's like, and you're like having a slight seizure following behind them. It is the worst.
And I love it when they always add in like a voice line or an animation when you bump into them or try to go past them, where they're like, Hey,
why
are you in such a hurry?
What?
And it's the same three voice lines.
Where's the fire, bub? I don't think anyone's ever said that, but
classic side quest voice line. Where's the fire, bub?
Bub.
You got it here. Okay, so what's our next one?
Next one is coping. Coping. video games as a coping mechanism. So, a little bit of the research, reading straight from their chapter. First is problem-focused coping, where the individual attempts to directly solve a problem at hand that is causing stress, such as getting organized, managing time, obtaining active support to solve a problem.
Okay.
That's the first type of coping. The second type of coping is an emotion-focused coping, where the individual decreases stress by regulating their feeling of the problem, such as by distraction with pleasurable activities, relaxation, or talking to a friend.
Okay, let's define coping just like from the outset, and then break that down into the two types. So coping is what?
Well, coping, I would say, is how you are handling or dealing with the negative experiences or emotions of the world around you. Okay, so it can be stress. Stress can be good, but if it's negative, then you've got to find a way of coping with that. And what games allow us to do is either, again, that playground of activity of alleviating some of that stress, or distraction with something that is completely unrelated, offering pleasure, relaxation, or social interaction with someone else.
So something's happened in the world around me, and for me to cope to it, I have to understand what my internal reality is and match it, or at least accept what the external reality of the circumstances that fits with coping. Okay, so my adjustment.
Well, and a study found that coping, which was characterized by the cumulative experience of forgetting daily problems or hassles or unpleasant feelings by escaping real life and all that, when you channel that into pleasurable experiences, this is one of the ways that major games motivate players and help them cope in their real lives, right? So it's kind of that idea of, there's something going on in my life I need to turn off for a while, and some of us go to video games to do that. But while we are gaming, we're actively coping with what's going on in the world. It's similar to sleep, when sometimes you go to sleep really stressed, or there's a lot on your mind. You wake up and you feel a little bit rejuvenated. The heart, the bed seat, of your emotions begins to heal while you are sleeping. It's a coping mechanism. Gaming can do the same thing.
Okay, so there were two types. There was problem-focused coping and emotion-focused coping. Let's talk a little bit more about the difference between the two.
Yeah, so an activity, game-based play, right, where you are able to address a similar problem in a game and solve it. That's a way of coping.
Okay.
I can control things in a game that I can't control in real life. Therefore, I'm coping with it through, again, this playground, sandbox sort of world. The second thing is to focus on something that is unrelated to the negative experience, but pleasurable. It's a distraction.
Okay. So video games are actively building a skill set within us to cope, and we can, when we understand it and pay attention to it, we can actually grow in it in our personal lives too. It's not like we have to sit down and say, I'm going to play this video game and learn how to cope. What we want to do is have an awareness that it's happening in the background and be able to take charge of it. Is that where we're headed here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, this gives you permission. It's a license to say, hey, I'm doing some self-care through gaming. It's not a mindless activity. This is not a time waste. I'm actually healing in some ways.
Speaking of healing, I think that probably brings us to our final topic, which is
recovery. So this is when people play games to escape from their daily stresses, usually associated with work or chores. This is why when you finish a long day of work or school, it's like, I just want to decompress with some games. It's not about coping with things, but it's about regaining, re-energizing to some degree, getting back some of that energy in your life. This kind of escapism, the research says, relieves stress via an activity that is, a broader system of recovery. And it's about recovering yourself. It's recovering that energy, recovering that motivation in life. It can be defined as recuperation from cognitive or emotional exhaustion.
Yeah.
So if you are exhausted, if you're exhausted from the tasks of life or school or work or whatever, you can recover this through gaming. And this is again research backed. This is great stuff.
Cool. When we talk about recovering in general, typically we talk about recovering from something, right? Like I'm recovering from my workday. I'm recovering from my flight. I'm recovering from an illness. We don't often talk about what we're recovering to.
Hang on one second.
Oh, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think we might have a dog that is throwing up. I think Wade heard the inevitable dog throw up. Dog throw up.
He tried.
Did you make
we made it out. We made it out.
Okay. Do you want to push pause for a second, or do you want to just wrap up while he's outside real quick?
Oh,
you
no,
need to let him
fine.
back in a minute.
No, he's fine.
Oh, okay, great. So
just like
perfect. I'm talking about recovery. We know what recovering from something is, and I'm going to ask, what are we recovering to? And the question would be like, I'm recovering back to myself, which requires an understanding of self.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring that up, and you want to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll debrief from there.
I love it.
And we'll wrap it up. Okay, great. Smile. Okay, so a lot of the time we talk about recovering from something. When we think of recovery, we say recovering from an injury, recovering from an illness, recovering from a long day at work or a stressful season in life. I think we all experience that. Recovery kind of requires a destination, though. And so I wonder in this context, we know what we're recovering from, but what are we recovering to?
What a great question. And this idea of recovery, which is, it's relatable to everyone, but I think that it's also relatable to, we talk about substance abuse recovery. We talk about trauma recovery and all of that kind of stuff. Recovering is getting yourself back to your true self, who you truly are. It is recovering the lost self. And I think that's one thing that gaming can help us do. We recover that which has been chiseled away, worn down, eroded from the things of the world. And so it's a recovery to yourself.
That might be one of my favorite quotes that we've talked about.
It's cool, right?
Gaming helps us recover our lost self.
Oh, right.
That's a great quote.
Isn't that awesome?
Gaming helps us recover
this is it. Like you grew up in a time when our parents didn't understand games, or they understood Pong or Atari or something like that.
There's definitely some disconnect.
Beginning Mario sort of stuff. And like gaming was so new that it was seen as frivolous. The stuff of nerds or niche communities and stuff that wouldn't do anything with their lives. But here we're actually finding that it can enhance and elevate our lives to a whole new psychosocial positive result. And that is so cool to me. I wish that I had this research and as a 7-year-old being like, Mom, look at this. But what 7-year-old would do that?
We did talk about that a lot around sports, and that was kind of how it was discussed. It was like sports, hobbies, Boy Scouts, those kinds of things. But I think the fact that they're more universally applicable to play and our hobbies and recreation in general, and that we have the research to now understand how those things happen in our play, really allows us to take advantage of what that is. Well, thanks for all the thoughts, and can you quote our authors and the book again for the folks as we kind of wrap up this segment?
Absolutely. So the chapter is 4 Pillars of Healthy Escapism in Games: Emotional Regulation, Mood Management, Coping, and Recovery by Mehmet, Kosa, and Ahmet Uysal. And you can get that in the full book, which is called Game User Experience and Player-Centered Design by Barbaros Boston is the editor.
That title is very catchy.
Yeah, just really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
We'll have links to all this in the show notes and description. Just to close this out, thanks for the time, everybody. This has been Video Game Vacation, 4 ways to ensure gaming re-energizes you. Thanks. Hey everyone, welcome to our final segment, which is our Gains Before Games segment. Prof does this with his students in his classroom. Tell us what we're all about.
Gains Before Games is all about feeding your real life before you feed your gaming life. So getting those gains, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, whatever it is, before you get into your games. And so just promoting healthy practices.
Perfect. So we walk through 4 domains of life every 4 episodes. This is our first turnover back around to the physical domain.
Heck yeah.
So we're going to process a little bit about what we want to be different about our lives and issue kind of a physical challenge for us this week to kind of get us going. So for you, listener and viewer, we just want to say, hey, what's something physically that you picked up on or that this episode made you think about that could help you kind of improve in your daily life? Mine was going out and taking a walk with a family member to socialize based on healthy relationships from episode 1, and it was great. It was wonderful. We had a very nice time. So physical domain, Wade, what are you thinking this week?
So it's July. I'm in the midst of playing Dawn Trail. And Dawn Trail, Final Fantasy 14, is all about this vacation vibe. Eating quesadillas and drinking margaritas and all that kind of stuff. And so it's like the whole fantasy to reality sort of thing. It's July. I want to take physical proximity of vacation and stuff. So again, it's sunny where I am. I'm going to be outside. Like that's me for 3 months.
Nice.
And so the goal is I've got to physically get outside and do some things that are going to rejuvenate me while I've got some time off from work and all that kind of stuff. So really trying to live out that physical relaxation piece that sometimes I can neglect. Sometimes I get so caught up in the gym and all that kind of stuff that like I forget, hey, let's enjoy physical life outside. I don't know, maybe play some pickleball. I don't know.
That ties in really well to what I was thinking about for the physical domain. And I was thinking about how I just don't feel like my exercise has been like physically challenging. Not that the like energy exerted isn't. I've been doing a lot of outside stuff, chores, walking, that kind of stuff. But I think I'm ready for like an excitement when it comes to exercise. So I think maybe some pickleball, some racquetball maybe, since it's so hot, a little outside. I'm going to introduce a little more challenge to kind of make my skill rise to the occasion a little bit and make me exercise and be active in some ways that I wouldn't if it's just me on the exercise bike or me walking, because I don't get terribly competitive with myself. But you throw in somebody else, then we're on. So
this is a great opportunity to help our viewers and listeners on this. How do you quantify that? So for me personally, I'm going to have myself have 3 30-minute times where I am relaxing outside.
Okay.
3 30-minute times a week over the next month where I'm relaxing outside. What about you?
I think I'm going to shoot for at least 2 up to 6 competitive exercise activities.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
That's awesome.
That's what I'm going to go for. So there it is. So if you're a friend of mine and you're watching this or listening to this,
you're ready.
Hit me up. Let's go.
Ready to get smoked in some racquetball.
Yeah, we got to get out that frustration somehow. Do you need a break? Are you even having fun anymore?
You need a break.
Well, we won't let you rage quit baseball anymore. Thanks, Wade, for the discussion, and we'll see you guys next segment. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. A big thanks to Sing for the Laughter for the use of their music, and another shout out to Nick Smith for the graphics. They're awesome. Thanks, Nick. Listener, we hope that you have had a fantastic day, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode.